We've seen some of the world's most expensive penthouses and some of the most amazing homes that celebs own around the world in the past few months. But what about these celebrities who don't spend all their money on huge luxury homes? Where do they reside? Their home could be a house in the woods, or it could be a trailer park where they live with their alpacas. There's only one way to find out, so hold on tight and enjoy a look at some of the world's biggest stars and the humble homes they've chosen to live in. Elijah Wood, net worth $35 million, purchased for $1 million, square footage 3,200 square feet. Elijah Wood went on an adventure that would change his life forever when he was only 20 years old in the early 2000s. As Frodo Baggins in the Lord of the Rings series, Wood became famous, rich, and everything in between. He now has a small wealth of almost $35 million, but he chooses to live a simple life in a simple house. For some reason, Elijah Wood didn't get the news that everything is bigger in Texas. His Victorian-style home in Austin, which cost him less than $1 million, is only about 3,200 square feet. But since Elijah lived in a hobbit hole for so long, the house probably feels like a mansion to him. Warren Buffett, net worth $102.1 billion, purchased for $31,000. Square footage, 65,000 square feet. Buffett has been one of the richest people in the world for decades, thanks to his business sense and several well-thought deals. Most people would think that someone with a net worth of over $100 billion would live on a private island, or at least have a house the size of a small town. When someone asked Buffett why he lived in the same house for so long, he said, "I'd move if I thought I'd be happier somewhere else." Warren Buffett has been happy to live in the same Omaha, Nebraska house he bought in the late 1950s for just over $31,000. It's about $250,000 now. Right now, he's the 10th richest person in the world. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, net worth $180 million, purchased for $2.3 million, square footage 74,052 square foot. If you thought that life in New York was pricey, you were only looking at New York City and the areas that are closest to it. It's only 40 miles from the city that never sleeps to Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, who played Deadpool. They found a great place to live and didn't pay nearly as much as you might think. In New York City, $2.3 million would be enough to buy a small house, but in Bedford, New York, where Blyant's mansion is, it was enough to buy a 74,052 square foot plot of land. This is where the couple relaxes with their 3 girls. The couple has a net worth of close to $200 million, but they decided to live in the country instead of the city because they want to be alone. Zoe De Chanel, net worth $25 million, purchased for $1.69 million, square footage unknown. Zoe De Chanel, who was in New Girl, was once paid $95,000 per episode. But just because she was making more than most Americans do in a year doesn't mean she was spending it carelessly. While New Girl was at its most popular, its star was still living in a very simple home. This may come as a surprise to some. Zoe De Chanel used to live in a cute Hollywood Hills home that cost her only $1.69 million, which is a very low price for the area. In 2015, she and her now ex-husband, Jacob Petchnik, moved into a bigger wooden furnished home that cost $5.58 million with their 2 kids. Monica Lewinsky, net worth $41 million, purchased for $8 million, square footage 13,000 square feet. The late 1990s were marked by Monica Lewinsky. She's started a new and exciting part of her life with the purchase of a luxurious 13,000 square foot home for $8 million. The house, which is in a beautiful area of Sacramento, California, shows how she's bounced back from the scandal and changed. Beyond its awe-inspiring size, the house exudes luxury, with rooms that were carefully planned and modern conveniences. The beautiful home shows how successful Lewinsky has been and how determined she is to move on. It also shows that life gives people second chances and the chance to write their own stories. Tim Cook, net worth $1.5 billion, purchased for $1.9 million, square footage 2,400 square feet. Since Tim Cook took over as CEO of Apple from Steve Jobs 10 years ago, The company's sales have more than doubled. As a reward for all his hard work, Cook was given a $750 million bonus in the form of 5 million shares in the company, which increased his net worth to $1.5 billion. Cook decided to live in a small, less than $2 million home in Palo Alto, California, even though he was rich before the bonus. But times have changed, and the Cooks just moved into a slightly bigger, modernist estate that's 10,000 square feet and cost $9.1 million. The garage is almost as big as their old house. Robert Pattinson, net worth $100 million. Purchased for $2,176,500. Square footage, 2,000 square feet. A little more than 5 years ago, Robert Pattinson seemed to have had enough of spending money on expensive things he'd never use. He'd been in the spotlight for years, in part because of his role in the Twilight Saga and part because of his relationship with his co-star in Twilight, Kristen Stewart. Pattinson sold his 4,000 square foot home in LA and bought a house that was about half the size. He paid a fair amount of money, $2 million for the new house. Back of another house, down a trail, is where Robert Pattinson keeps his bat cave. This simple 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom rustic house has everything Patton needs as a home. Lea Michele, net worth $12 million. Purchased for $1.4 million. Square footage, unknown. Even though the Glee star has recently bought some fancy new homes, Lea Michele hasn't always lived in the lap of wealth. The lead actress didn't move into a house fit for a star until the 6th season of the award-winning show. Lea Michele used to live in a somewhat less fancy home that she bought for an acceptable $1.4 million before she moved into her current $3 million home. Even though it wasn't a castle, the 2-bedroom cottage in Los Angeles where she used to live and had a solar-heated saltwater pool and sold for $1.825 million in 2015. Don Cheadle, net worth $40 million. Purchased for $894,000. Square footage, 2,400 square feet. Don Cheadle got his first professional acting job in the great year of 1984. There was a steady rise in Cheadle's resume and net worth over the years and decades. Though more and more parts came his way, Don Cheadle didn't give in to the urge to buy a big house. Cheadle bought the house, built in the 1950s, for less than $1 million 7 years ago. The industrial-style house in Venice, California didn't stay in the family for long, though. His designer wife, Bridget Coulter, fixed it up, and they sold it for $2.45 million not even 2 years later. Kirk Cousins, net worth $70 million. Purchased for $290,000. Square footage, 3,000 square feet. In his first 6 years in the NFL, Kirk Cousins played for the Washington Redskins. He got his start in the league in 2012. Professional athletes like Cousins make a lot of money every year, but he and his family didn't leave their 3,000 square foot home in Ashburn, Virginia until he signed with Minnesota in 2018. Someone else who used to play football for Washington and bought the house for less than $300,000 in 2000 rented it to Cousins. With their 2 kids, Kirk and his wife never had to look for anything else. The 3-story house with hardwood floors and a gas stove had everything they needed. Some of Kirk's $70 million is being used by the Cousins to build their dream home from scratch on the shores of Lake Michigan. Mark Zuckerberg, net worth $116.1 billion. Purchased for $7 million. Square footage, unknown. For most people, $7 million is a lot of money to spend on a house, unless you have a net worth in the 12 figures, like Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. Zuckerberg is happily living in a quaint home in Palo Alto, California, with his wife, 2 kids, and a wealth of $116 billion. Palo Alto is one of the most expensive places to live in the United States and is known as the luxury home of American high tech, or Silicon Valley. Don't be fooled by the low price tag of $7 million, though. Zuckerberg has also spent more than $50 million buying properties nearby, only to tear them down and build smaller ones in their place. The nearby homes give the area more peace, making it feel like a homey place that any parent would be proud to have their kids live in. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon